Firstly, resilience is not a fixed trait. Resilience is a dynamic process. Resilience is a skill or capacity that is just not automatically developed. It needs to be intentionally cultivated by design. Resilience is not about how we endure, it's about how we recharge. Resilience is not solely individual, it's relational and environmental. And resilience is not about the absence or suppression of emotion. Resilience is actually about our thought and emotional awareness. So I think certainly in terms of some of the media stuff that you might see, or some of the lay person understanding around resilience, that's probably the bits around it being a fixed trait, about it being about endurance, about showing no emotion. That's probably where some of the things have come from that we've tried to tackle and address in terms of some of our kind of our work.
Okay, so there's loads there. Maybe I just pick up on that last one, the absence of emotion. That's quite interesting in the sense that the if I fly with that cliched version, it's just put on your big boy, big girl pants and get on with it, tough it out. That sense, when actually understanding the emotion sounds like it might be part of kind of developing a resourcefulness for yourself.
Yeah, those who demonstrate resilience, we know from the research that those who demonstrate resilience actually face a lot of negative emotions. So feelings of shame, guilt, embarrassment, anger. And it's not that they don't experience those emotions, that just better able to actually firstly accept those emotions and then take the time to process and manage those emotions. So as you said, that idea of just getting on with it, stiff upper lip, that's not what resilience is about. Resilience is actually taking the time to be self-aware of what you're thinking and you're feeling, and particularly if those thoughts and feelings are unhelpful, it's then taking the time to process and manage that.
Okay, so that hints to this idea that it's not necessarily something that you are born with, but actually you can cultivate it. That, and so what are your tips there that and maybe I need to distinguish a couple of things here about the sort of daily, I think you call them in your research daily hassles, and big events that can be quite disturbing, can be quite stressful, that you will need to sort of dig yourself back out from. Maybe if we can just do some clarification about that, but also then maybe if you could suggest, okay, there's a skill and an intentional approach to understanding what you've experienced that can develop future resilience.
Yeah, and I think that's really important in terms of language and terminology. I often hear people labeling individuals as either resilient athletes or
Yeah.
resilient individuals, and I often talk about resilience on a continuum where you can have higher or lower levels of resilience depending on context and depending on time. Um, and I think if we move away, if we continue using that label of resilient, it kind of implies that there's nothing you can do about your resilience levels. Whereas again, we know that actually we need to think about resilience as a capacity that needs to be developed, trained, and practiced in the same way that you might think about your technical and your physical skills. I guess about how you go about developing resilience. And as you mentioned, it does depend on context. So how you might develop resilience in relation to daily hassles might be very different to how you develop resilience in relation to more kind of significant life events. We've developed what we call mental fortitude training, resilience training, a bit of a framework, which is very, very practical. And it focuses on three areas. It focuses on personal qualities, which are your kind of psychological skills, psychological characteristics. It focuses on what we call a challenge mindset, which is specifically around helping individuals to view pressure as an opportunity rather than viewing pressure as a threat. And then the third aspect of the framework is focusing on creating what we call a facilitative environment, which is a balance between social agents, so whether that's coaches, parents, people in the organization, etc., having that balance between kind of an environment where there is high challenge and high support. So in terms of the development of the resilience, we're not suggesting that this is a one size fits all, where actually, this is the only approach to developing resilience, but certainly we found it to be a useful framework, certainly in the sporting kind of context.
Could we go through a couple of those?
Yes.
And I'm almost anticipating those personal qualities, that whether that's a personality characteristic or a trait, whether that's something that kind of predisposes you to a degree of resilience. I'm also conscious that if you might not have the perfect blend, you can still develop it by the sounds of it. Could you talk a little bit about some of those personal qualities that might support a more resilient approach?
Yeah, sure. So this is actually based on some of the research that we did looking at resilience in Olympic champions. And we identified five, again, these aren't necessarily the five, but we identified, I guess, five clusters of psychological factors that we knew, or what we found, to underpin resilience in these athletes. So these were motivation, confidence, focus, having a positive personality, and what we termed perceived social support. So yeah, those were the five, I guess, clusters of psychological factors that we identified as kind of underpinning the resilience performance relationship.